get off the exit, try to go around traffic, whatever I can do to get to my destination quicker. But as women, as single women, we're always waiting on God to send us that right man. And we don't like that waiting process, do we? We don't like that, but we want God's best. We want who God has for us, but we don't like waiting on God's best. We don't want to wait on the person that God has intended for us, but we want the person God has for us. And it's like we do whatever we can do to get through the season quicker. We do whatever we can do to speed up the process. And we end up being in broken relationships, dealing with the wrong people at the wrong time in the wrong season. And what I realized is that I found myself out of God's will, out of God's timing, and out of God's season. And it's nothing worse than being in a place in your life and you're out of God's will. And I learned that, you know what, God has a season for everything. Everything in life, he has a timing, he has a season for it. And it may not be when we want it. It may not be the time when we think we need it, but there is a season and a time for everything. And I remember talking to God. I remember being in college and at Valdosta State, and I was dating guys. Dating this guy, dating that guy. I like to keep people on my team, I said, have a team, no real commitment, but I just, date you, whatever. And I continued to get hurt. I wanted marriage, but I was going about it the wrong way. I didn't want to wait on God's timing and God's season. They were coming, so I just went on dates and went out and had relationships with all the wrong people. And I knew they were wrong. It's like, they're not Christian, they're not for you, but you give them time anyway. So I was spending time dealing with randoms, people that had no type of significance really in my future. And so I spent my time doing that, and I continued to get hurt. I mean, cheated on and rejected and just abused. But they always said, you're wifey material. You're wife. You're somebody that I want to make my wife, put a ring on, that whole thing. And so I was like, okay, but I knew deep down that person or those men were not for me. And so there goes with the settling, because they're talking the right things. And I start believing it, but yet they cheated on me. They, because I wasn't giving nothing up, but they cheated on me because they wanted to string me along and pull me along and pull me along and pull me along until they were ready. They didn't want to make commitment and all of this. So I just got tired. I said, Lord, I want to be married. And I was like 22. Didn't know nothing. Like, I just knew I always had an idea. I want a family. I want children. I want this. I want that. And I got to a point where I just got fed up. I got fed up and I said, Lord, I'm not going to deal with these sort of men anymore. You know what? I'm going to make a list. I went through that list. I said, I'm going to make a list. And I got out my paper and I wrote down everything. I mean, I had at least 30 things on that list. From how he looked, the color of his teeth, the color of his eyes, how he dressed. I mean, I had it to a T. His build, his everything. To his education, everything was on that list. And I just kept reading that list. And I thought about saying, I won't have to marry God. Pretty much. That person is non-existent. And I said, if you don't meet these 30 things on my list, I'm not even dealing with you. And God spoke to me. And God says, I'm not going to just give you what you want, but I'm going to give you what you need. And when he spoke that to me, I said, well, this is what I need. You know what I mean? But he says, there were some things that I want to give you that you don't even know you need. There are some things in you that the person that I'm going to link you up with is going to be able to pull those things out of you and be able to help you and to be able to pull the best out of you. And so I'm like, okay, And so in my mind, I'm like, well, Lord, I don't want to. My biggest fear was dealing with a Christian man that I wasn't attracted to. I'm just being real. In my mind, when I thought about a Christian guy, I just thought about somebody who was lame and not cute. And I was just like, Lord, like I have these desires. And like Gabrielle said, God will give you the desires of your heart, you know, but I had to trust him. And that's the key thing, is trusting him where you are. And so I said, you know what? I took that list. I looked at that list. And as much as I wanted to stick to that list, I tore it up. I tore it into shreds. And I said, you know what? The man that I want, and it's funny that Gabrielle told us to write down some non-negotiables, some deal breakers. These are some deal breakers that I said, you know what? I'm not going to settle. This is what I'm looking for. And the top thing on my list was a man of God, a man of prayer, a man of faith, a man of the word, a man who can lead me spiritually. Because all of those guys that I was dealing with did not have that. They were not giving me that. They could not connect with me on that level. When I wanted to share something about the word, they're looking at me like, okay. It was no communication there, no connection there. All we could connect on was just things in the world. We couldn't connect on that point. So that part of me, my spirit, was not getting fed. It was not, nothing was happening in that area. And so I said, these are some non-negotiables. I'm not going to settle. I want a man of God. And so I said, you know what? I had all these things on this list. And I said, I'm not even half of those things. So how am I going to, I'm not even half of these. I'm like, how am I going to expect something from a man and I don't even have it? Powerful man of God, leader, all this stuff. I'm like, I don't even have that. I want to be able to have a relationship with you. So when my man, whoever you have for me, finds me, he finds me doing the will of God. He finds me praying. He finds me with a relationship with God. He finds me already there or getting there on that level, on that journey. And so I said, he took me to the book of Ruth. And in the book of Ruth, it talks about how Ruth was in the field and how she was working that field. Her mind was not fixed on the other workers. Now, us, we'll go on the field and be looking at the men on the field, and not looking at the job, at hand. But she was on that field. She was working the field, and doing all this to provide for her family. And she was focused on the task at hand. And then the word says in Ruth that Boaz saw her in the field working. And I just saw that picture, and it was something that I wanted for my life. I wanted my man to find me working in my purpose, doing what God had called me to do. So I said, Lord, I surrender it. I take my hands off of it. I'm just going to do what you've called me to do. I want to be so devoted to you that when that man comes, he really has to get to you to get to me. He's not going to just come straight to, he has to see me working the field. I want him to see my worship and to see my life and to see my ministry and to see what God was doing in my life. And not just him seeing that, but I wanted to see that in him. I wanted to see him doing those things, not me. I always had to drag men to God. Pull them to God. Pull them to God. And it was just such a struggle. And what happened was they ended up pulling me back into the world. And so I said, you know what? No. I'm focused. And I think the very first thing, even now in this time of singleness, is that, as Gabrielle said, be devoted to the things of God. Find out your vision. Find out what God has for you. Find out your purpose and work it. Work it. Focus on that relationship, because it's in that relationship where God will begin to speak to you. He talks. Yeah. God talks, and he's so mindful of you. He's so mindful. Everything that concerns you concerns him. And that's what ministered to me, is that the more I spent time with God, the more sensitive I became to his voice. The more visions I began to see, the more dreams I began to have. And he began to show me my future. And I said, okay, Lord, I know you got me. I know you have me. And it was one particular moment. Our church does a fast every single year. And this particular year, we were doing a fast. And I was just praying, and God showed me a vision of wedding bells and a wedding cake topper. I was not dating anyone. I was not even thinking about anyone. I was thinking about God. I was just in my zone relationship, working on me. And he showed me that. And I'm like, well, what is this? You know, what is this? And a few weeks after that vision, I met my now fiance. But I didn't even know, we didn't even think that this was the connection. But God was doing something. And he had invited me to a church service because he knew, he saw me at work. He saw me in ministry and invited me to something, a service that he was ministering at and he was worshiping it. And that was the first time I was able to see him worship God. And that's something that I want to do. I want to see him doing this. I want to find him in the church. You know what I mean? I want him to find me there. And so we connected at that point. But to move forward in our dating was different. Our dating, even now that we're engaged, our dating doesn't look anything like how I dated in the past. Nothing. It can't. And so our dating is different because our foundation is different. And a lot of the times when you're thinking about relationships in the world, the foundation is sex most of the time. It's that intimate connection. And so because we don't have that, all was left was, hey, the word of God, prayer, and communication. And most guys don't want to communicate. Most guys don't want to do all of those things. But that's where our relationship was founded. It's on prayer, the word of God. And I had never, ever experienced anything like that. For a man to say, hey, we're praying today. Every day. Every day. And I'm like, I'm always the one that's trying to pull. I'm always the one that's trying to, you know. And for him to say, let's study this word. Let's get into this word. This is what God has shown me. And just to hear that, it wasn't just a one-sided conversation any longer. I really had somebody that I could connect with and that I could talk about my vision and that we can go forward in ministry together. And it's beautiful. Not saying that we don't have issues and problems and all that stuff, because we do. But we go to the word of God and we literally go to prayer. Our relationship is saturated in that, you know? And so I'm just encouraging you all, even in myself, even in this process of dating, is that for one, don't settle. And for two, make sure that you're connected with someone who is a believer, that you're equally yoked. And I know a lot of times people will tell you that they're Christians. I go to church, I got saved, I got baptized, you know, all this stuff. But if you don't see the fruit, don't believe it. You want to be able to see the fruit. Because if there's no fruit, there's no future. There's no future. Because all they're saying is the things that you want to hear. But I was able to see fruit in my now fiance. He was able to see fruit in me. And so that fruit, I was able to see his growth and growth and growth. And since we've been together for 4 years, but all of those 4 years, he has grown, I have grown. I have not digressed. He has not digressed. We have grown together. And there's still things that God is working on us, but we're continuing to grow. And I always feel like that it's easier. We always think as women, as spiritual women, Christian women, that we can bring a brother up, or we can bring him up to our level spiritually. When really, it's him bringing you down. Just imagine yourself on a chair and him on the floor. Is it easier for you to pick a 200-pound man up to get on your level, or for him to pull you off that chair? It's easier for him to pull you down than it is for you to pull him up. And so what I found is that these two individuals have to be on that same level, on one accord. On one accord. When I met him, he was wearing a ring. You know, I've never, you know, he was wearing a ring on this finger. And I just asked him, like, what, you know, something to tell me or what, you know? You know, and he says, you know, I've experienced, you know, sex. I've experienced all that stuff. He was like, but I'm making a commitment to hold off and say, you know, into marriage. He just said it blunt. He didn't know nothing about me. He didn't know nothing about what I was doing. I didn't come out and say, hey, this is what he just told me with a straight face. Like, okay, I'm giving you the straight up. Our first conversation. And I said, well, I'm doing the same thing. And he said, okay. But he says, normally when I used to talk to girls and I tell them that, they would find anything in their power to kind of bring me down and to kind of like still pull me into that world, have that influence on me. But it's something about being on one accord. When you're on one accord, y'all are going towards the same goal. Y'all are going towards the same thing. He was already in a place of